guys. Welcome to the new episode of the First Responder Playbook. It is my pleasure to welcome my guest tonight, Dr. Matt Kutz, who is a PhD in global leadership, award-winning author, award-winning educator, researcher, and speaker. He's most excited about being a husband, dad, and grandpa. In his spare time, is insanely passionate about helping people gain perspective and overcome the adversity and uncertainty that life brings. He does that through helping others to develop an epic mindset and practice contextual intelligence and 3D thinking. Dr. Kutz, thanks for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me, Brent. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So tell me, how did you go down the road of getting your PhD?
Well, that's a long story. So I'm an athletic trainer. So my background is athletic training, sports medicine. In fact, work a lot with EMTs and paramedics, and I always really appreciate what you do when we collaborate together, especially on the sports field. The transporting injured athletes and stuff is something we always take very seriously, and it's been a pleasure for me over the years. And it was in that space actually that I was working and teaching in an athletic training program. And I've always was a fan of leadership and always studied leadership and knew of it. My dad was a huge Civil War nerd, recreating the scenes and always reading about this general strategy or that major strat or whatever. And so I just always liked leadership. So when the opportunity came for me to have to get a terminal degree to stay in my faculty job that I was in, otherwise I would be booted out, I decided, well, let's go with leadership and see where that takes me. And boy, has that been quite a wild ride. It's been a lot of fun.
How was the process of actually getting it? A lot of long nights, or was it not too bad for you?
A lot of long nights, a lot of arguments with the wife who didn't see the vision as I saw it, so to speak. She's happy now, but those days were, and I'm the brilliant as I am, I decided to start a PhD program in a brand new community, in a brand new town with a brand new baby. So that was tough. Yeah, a lot of long nights because I also was working full time at the time. So I had a lot of people getting PhDs, stop working, become a graduate assistant, work full time with their mentor. And I couldn't afford to do that. So I had to work full time and take classes as I could towards that. And so, yeah, a lot of long nights for sure.
Yeah, I understand the struggle. I've got a year left, and I've been working full time the whole time, so
Yeah.
I'm ready to be done.
What are you working yours on?
Strategic leadership. So,
Awesome. Yeah.
with a concentration in coaching. So,
Okay. Awesome.
I actually was going to touch on this, but I'm really interested in your intelligence profile because I'm very big on assessments, and
Okay.
so I think that's awesome. So how did you go down the road of wanting to do athletic training? You did that full time, then you started working on your PhD. Did you stick with that, or what happened after the PhD?
Yeah. So I was a professor. I was working that full-time job. I was working clinical work as well as teaching. I was a part-time faculty working with the athletics department as well as teaching courses. And once I finished that PhD, I went full-time into as a faculty member teaching in an athletic training program. And now I teach in a DAT program, a doctor of athletic training program. So athletic training has really grown over the years and become a very viable and relevant healthcare profession to now we have advanced practice doctorates in athletic training. And I teach in one of those programs at Florida International University in Miami. And what's neat about that is our particular Doctor of Athletic Training program focuses exclusively on leadership, global mindset, things like that. Because as you know, in any healthcare clinical type field or discipline, we don't get a lot of leadership management type of education, maybe a course, maybe a module or two, but most of what we do, and for good reason, is clinically oriented. It's the anatomy, the emergency action plans, all those kinds of things, which obviously we need to do our job well. But once you're out there practicing, we realize, hey, there's a lot of leadership stuff that we need, strategic thinking, strategic planning, assessments. Where do we fit? How do we contribute? How's the team dynamic working? What can we do to do that? And all those things can be influenced by how we think, how we decide. And that's what's been a lot of fun for me and something that I've always loved.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I think that a lot of disciplines probably need more leadership focus in their practice of their discipline because you don't see that very often until you want to go get a master's or something,
Exactly.
and
Yeah, we relegate that normally to like the advanced practice. You'll learn it later, kind of thing, and it's a shame because it needs to happen sooner. I totally agree.
yeah, because I mean you think about it. I mean, I'll just use criminal justice for example. Is that everybody does all their criminal justice stuff with a bachelor's degree, and then you expect them to come in and work their way up through the profession, and then well, then what do you expect them to do when they want to promote up? You don't have
Right.
them any sort of leadership training, and then they have to go seek it out on their own, and then you're kind of relying on your department to do that, and they'll either say the schedule's tight or the funds are tight, and then you're scrounging, watching 1 hour leadership videos for an hour credit at a time, and
Yep.
it's just it's not a good practice. And I wish they'd start implementing that on a little bit lower level,
Right.
and just expand on it if you want to do your master's or doctorate. But I can be a dreamer, I
I
guess.
do. It sounds like we're living in the same world, anyways. That's for
Yep.
sure, because that's really how it works.
Yep. So let's talk about your book, Becoming Epic.
Yeah.
How can we apply that to first responders?
Yeah, so great question. So a little bit of background on the book is the idea behind becoming epic is my solution for what I consider mediocrity. And I think mediocrity is a major obstacle to anybody in any profession, in any industry. Those of us in the healthcare space and in your situation, the emergency healthcare space, when literally lives are on the line, life or death decisions are being made all the time, then it's important that you act epically, that you understand what that looks like and how that is. So mediocrity is your enemy. So we want to do the things that get us over and around mediocrity. And for me, that means practicing what I call 4 leadership maxims. Those 4 leadership maxims are the acronym for EPIC. So the first one is excellent. We have to be excellent in everything that we do as first responders, as athletic trainers, as wherever you're at, as a manager in a nursing department, or it doesn't matter where you're at. We need to be excellent, and that needs to be our track record. That needs to be what we are recognized and known for. And then beyond excellence, then we also need to be perceptive. And being perceptive for me is about noticing the things that other people don't notice. And in emergency care, for sure, that's a huge one. I mean, the standard basic for anybody who's taken just a basic CPR class, the first thing you have to do is make sure the scene is safe, right? So you have those situations going on, and that's noticing the things that you're supposed to notice and noticing the things that other people might not notice. That's what gets people in trouble. They run into a scene really quick and they don't realize that the danger they're putting themselves in before they check that scene, so to speak. So on that example, I think that speaks really well. But then also just in life in general, we have to learn to perceive the things and recognize the things that other people just aren't paying attention to. Leaders have to be good at that. So that leads us into our third maxim, epic maxim, that's inspiration and being inspired. For me, that happens two ways. First thing is, we as leaders need to know how to inspire ourselves, and especially in situations where you're constantly dealing with high stress situations like emergency care, emergency physicians, emergency nurses, athletic trainers, and in those immediate sports contacts. We can get subject to burnout very quickly. And I know in my profession, there's quite a litany of research on burnout in athletic training. And I also just know that there's also a lot of research in burnout and healthcare in particular because of those stressful situations. You can't get away from it. You're rehearsing and rehashing what should have happened, what didn't happen, things like that often. And that can lead to a lot of burnout. And because of that, we need to learn the science of learning how to find inspiration from within instead of always having to retreat. It's an important skill set. But then also the other part of inspiration is we as leaders need to know how to inspire others. So for me, that's a two-way maxim is I have to learn to cultivate inspiration that I have residing within me. Now that's unpacking quite a bit there, but we all need to learn to look in and see what's there that can cause us inspiration, because it is there, but oftentimes we neglect cultivating that. It becomes difficult. Once I think we're good at that, I think it becomes much easier for us to be able to cultivate and disseminate inspiration to other people. And then the fourth and final maxim of the epic leader is compassion. And compassion is another one of those things that has two meanings for me. And I write about this quite a bit in the book, but compassion for me, the individual, for yourself, is a one part. We don't talk a lot about self-care, self-compassion. And I think that's really important. But here's the twist that a lot of people don't get or are surprised about when I talk about what self-compassion really means. And to do that, if you'll just allow me a minute here, just to unpack kind of the word compassion itself. It's actually two words put together: com, which is Latin for alongside of or with, and then passion, and that which is the traditional word that we understand. Now, what's interesting about passion in our society and culture today, we have twisted the meaning of it to mean something that excites you, right? Something that you're excited about. Hey, I'm passionate about being a foodie. I'm passionate about poetry. I'm passionate about sports, whatever it might be. And when we talk about, those are things that make us happy, that we want to spend our time doing and pursuing. And that's really unfortunate, because that's really never what the word meant. Passion, in the true sense of the word, is something you're willing to suffer for. And, around here in the United States anyways, we talk at Easter time, there's movies and there's different things coming out called The Passion of the Christ, right? And when you really get to what that means, of course, we're talking about the suffering and torture, and that's really what passion means. So when you talk about compassion, it means walking alongside with or entering into your suffering. And how that plays out for self-care is we have to learn to do the hard thing. And so a leader who is compassionate does the hard thing. They do the difficult thing. You asked me earlier about the PhD and the journey with that and the late nights and all that. That's definitely a hard thing. You know that. You're in a doctoral program as well.
Yep.
Doing anything worth having, working on your relationship, for example, with your partner, with your spouse. I mean, it takes effort. It takes work. You've got to do the hard thing to grow as a leader, to learn your skills that you need to learn. You've got to do the hard thing. Stay diligent, stay faithful, keep learning, keep pursuing, health, same thing. Got to exercise, got to eat right. Don't want to. You got to do the hard thing. Leaders do the hard thing, but then once they do that and that becomes part of who they are as a leader, then it's easier for us to show compassion in the traditional sense for other people out there. Because if you're not willing to suffer for the things that are right, then you oftentimes don't have the capacity to give to others the way that they need you to show up for them. And otherwise you end up just being someone who needs them because you're a mess too. And so compassion ends up being a very, very important part of becoming epic. And I think all of those things apply very easily to emergency care, emergency management, and those disciplines, as well as general life.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to tell people all the time, if you don't take care of yourself, how do you expect to take care of others?
Exactly. That's exactly
And
right.
unfortunately, I think we in the first responder field oftentimes neglect ourselves, whether that's eating terribly or not working out or just not decompressing from work in itself, until it's too late, and then you're playing catch up. And when you play catch up, that's when other serious issues can start popping up. Is you know I and I've never I'm sure there's probably some actual studies out there, but that's when the suicide rates start
Yeah.
spiking and stuff like that. And so we've got to do a better job of taking care of ourselves
Right.
so that we can take care of others.
Yeah. I mean, there's a new, I don't know that it's new. I shouldn't say new. I have become recently aware, I suppose is a better way to say it. I have become recently aware of a line of inquiry and research on compassion fatigue. And I think this is fits very appropriately there because, in my opinion, the reason why compassion fatigue becomes a problem is because we ourselves aren't taking the time to rewire, regenerate, recoup. And I don't just mean taking a vacation and dismissing yourself from work. Hopefully, we're able to unplug. I mean, part of that, of course, is being able to unplug. But I think compassion fatigue as a syndrome, so to speak, you get to that point when you just have given so much and not taken the time to recover. I mean, there are times when, in emergency situations, seem like that you have to keep giving, you have to keep going. I mean, the example that comes to mind is during the pandemic, our nurses, here in the United States, and I know everywhere, not just the United States, but the nurses, really gave above and beyond. I mean, and I'm not saying other professions didn't, but they got a lot of press for that and well deserved. I mean, they were on the front lines. They were in the hospitals. They were dealing with this, and there was no time for a break for them. They couldn't, and those are the kinds of situations where, sure, those things happen from time to time, but when that's over, you have to take the time to make sure that you're okay. Like you said, I mean, how can you take care of someone when you're not taking care of yourself? And not that we can dictate when we can take care of ourselves all the time, but when the opportunity is there, we need to take it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I'm very passionate about. So, your book, what all does your book entail? And you know, where can people like start getting that so that way they can start learning about all this?
Yeah. So a couple books. I'll talk about the one we're talking about is Becoming Epic. And the subtitle is How Excellence, Perception, Inspiration, and Compassion is a Remedy for Mediocrity. And I wrote that book after my own, bad news. I got some really bad news a couple years ago about having prostate cancer and all those kinds of things. And I went through my own, emotional time there. And it was during my radiation that I took the time. I had 40 days of radiation, which I had to do every day, same time, had to cancel a bunch of things and all that stuff that goes with that. And I didn't want to let myself get discouraged because it's really easy to sit at home for 40 days and the only thing you're doing is waiting to go to your next radiation treatment. I mean, that can be a real issue. So I set a goal for myself to write 1,000 words every day for those 40 days, just as a way to cathartic, get some ideas out, get some thoughts out, things like that. And what ended up happening is I found myself in that process explaining and unpacking what I always had referred to as the epic life, a life that's full of excellence, a life that's perceptive, a life that's inspired, and a life that's compassionate. And I started writing that out. And for me, it was always just a little moniker, a little thing that I use to just, inspire my kids or my wife. Remember, be epic today. But I never really thought about it beyond that. What had happened during those 40 days is I expanded that and I actually unpacked, okay, what does it mean to be excellent? What are the obstacles to excellence? What can you do to become more excellent? What are the practical things? One of the things I recommend, for example, is understanding the huge difference between being excellent and being perfect. So many people struggle with perfectionism. And the issue is you can't be perfect. but you can be excellent. And I explain that, what that looks like, how that feels, and people tend to be really responding to that. And so I wrote about each of those 4 things, and the book, each chapter is organized around what excellence is, what inspiration is, perception, etc. What are the obstacles to each one of those, and then action steps to get towards and to move towards each one. And then I open with kind of a little discourse on the first chapter or 2 is on the problem of mediocrity, the solution of the epic maxims, and then what that looks like at the very end. And the final chapter is just about, how becoming epic is a journey. And I appreciate how you open up our conversation asking about the journey, because it is a journey, but it's a journey that no one can do alone. And what I recommend and what I talk about is then finally bringing that full circle is, if you want to become epic, then you've got to find the people around you in your community who can help you do that, because you can't do it alone.
Yep, I agree wholeheartedly. It's a journey that you can't do by yourself. You really
Right.
can't. So let's talk about your contextual intelligence profile. Assessments are kind of becoming, I don't want to say in vogue, but there's a lot of different assessments out there, and I really think that you can learn from the good ones. You can learn
Yeah.
a lot of things from them. How did you go about developing your own, and how does it help people?
Yeah. So that was a fun one for me. Is one of the things that the contextual intelligence is a skill set that I identified through my research, and it was actually an accidental finding of my dissertation, believe it or not, and it's turned into this whole other thing. And so the first book that I wrote in the professional space, I've written textbooks and things like that, but nobody likes to read those. And this contextual intelligence book I wrote several years ago, just the second edition just came out in August, just earlier this month. And what that is about, it's about learning the skills to navigate uncertainty and complexity. And we talk a lot about VUCA in that book. VUCA is an acronym for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, and how that's really the new normal today. And if that is, in fact, the new normal, which it is, then we need new skill sets to navigate those situations. So I outlined what I think those skill sets are, and I talked about those as contextual intelligence. And in my dissertation, what I found was there are 12 behaviors of a person who practices contextual intelligence at a higher frequency than other people. And so I identified those 12 behaviors, and then after some more analysis and different factor analyses and different research procedures and methods, what we found is those 12 behaviors actually factored into 3 groups. And those 3 groups I began to call 3-dimensional thinking. The reason I call it that is because the 3 groups are time orientation. So, for example, 4 of the 12 behaviors factor into a hindsight orientation. In other words, you're aware of the past, there's awareness about the past, things like that, memories, experiences, etc. Then there are 4 of the behaviors fit into an insight category, which is awareness of the present, being aware of what's around you in real time right now. What is the current situation that you're dealing with? And then the third and final 4 behaviors fell into what I call the foresight category, which has to do with how you anticipate the future, how you see the future, how you articulate the future, how you relate to it. So when you talk about hindsight, insight, and foresight, those are essentially past, present, and future, the 3 dimensions of time. And so what I was able to do with some help of some colleagues and some people better at stats than I am is create a profile. It's a 48-item inventory. And what we do is we've taken the 12 contextual intelligence behaviors and developed frequency-rated questions around each one of those behaviors. So in other words, not is it important, not questions like that, but how often do you do this thing? And then based on how often they do it, we can score it and extrapolate it into the 3 dimensions of time. So what you end up getting when you take the contextual intelligence profile is you get a score, you get a series of pie charts essentially that tell you where you fall on the hindsight, insight, and foresight dimensions. And most people are hindsight dominant. Leaders and visionaries tend to be foresight dominant. And then there are people who are also insight dominant. And what we use that for is for team development, program development, what members of a team do you need? What is your current team status? I mean, because you find people like to surround themselves with people who are like them. So we have a lot of people who are managers or executives in an organization, and we find that they're all foresight dominant. And what they have, and they wonder why things aren't clicking or things aren't working, or why there might be tension with one particular outsider on their management team. And what we find out is, we've got 4 foresight dominant thinkers and 1 hindsight dominant thinker. And this person's always bringing up what didn't work, why it didn't work, why we can't do it again. And everybody else is always thinking about, well, let's try this and let's try that. And so it really helps explain the team dynamic, but then it also gives you a little bit of insight into how you make decisions and handle stress, because you'll default to whatever that preference is. I'm a dreamer or I'm a realist. Dreamers are foresight dominant. Stress comes, they just start fantasizing about a different future, and they ignore the present moment, the insight factor. And so it helps us do that. And then once we find that someone is low in a particular 3D category, then we can look even more deeply, because we're ranking them on how they practice each of the behaviors. So we can identify a particular behavior that they're low on. It's like, well, why you're low on insight is because you don't do this behavior frequently enough. So we can do some coaching and some leadership development in that space by coaching up this particular behavior to bring them more, have more insight, for example, or whichever area they might be low in.
I love that. How can somebody, like, if they're interested in doing that, how can they take the assessment?
Yeah. So the best place is just go to my website, and which is MatthewKutz.com, and Kutz is spelled Kutz. So at MatthewKutz.com, there's a space on there for the inventory, and it just sends you to an email, because there's a cost to it. So you just it'll take you to the page. It'll explain it. There's a little video there to watch how it works, all that, and then you just shoot me an email. I create a code for you, and I just send you the code. You take the assessment, and you get an 8-page customized PDF immediately that tells you, here's what you're high in, here's what you're low in, here's the common behaviors that would lead to this, and here's behaviors you need to work on. And it's pretty neat. It's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. When you started going down the journey of writing a book, and looking at your website, you've written several books.
Mhm.
What was the journey like in writing the book? I know you said the leadership one was during your cancer diagnosis, but I feel like a lot of times, especially, there's a lot of people out there with stories to tell,
Yeah.
but they're so afraid of taking that step of writing the book.
It's so
Um,
intimidating. Yeah, I totally agree. Same was for me, because the first thing you begin to tell yourself or hear is the imposter syndrome sets in, right? It's like, I'm not qualified to do this. I'm not you think about all these award-winning New York Times best-selling authors. You're like, I can't do that, and so we suffer from imposter syndrome, and we begin to feel like we're not worthy, we don't have the skills, our story's really not that interesting after all, and so we've got to first get over that negative self-talk. That's huge, because like you just said, everyone does have a story, and there are ways to learn to tell stories. And this is what's beautiful about publishing today. Now, this might not have been true 100 years ago, but today it certainly is true, is that there is an incredible amount of help for you to learn how to write, learn how editors and all these different people. Now, obviously, those aren't free. So there's the other big thing that a lot of authors don't realize is it's an expense. It's definitely an expense, especially if you want a quality product. I mean, you can just write something and get it out there. You can use Create Space or all these free publisher things and all that. And that might be what you want. And that's fine if that's your goal. But if you're actually wanting to influence and make an impact, then there are other costs to that of just getting over that initial fear. But having people critique your work, which is incredibly difficult, because here now you have your heart and soul into a project. You think you've just told your story as best you can tell it, and then so you give it to an editor, or you have somebody read it who wants to help you polish it. Their goal is to really help you, but they come back and say, yeah, cut out chapter 13, like all of it, like the whole chapter. I mean, I worked really hard on that chapter. That happened to me in my epic book. My editor came back and said, yeah, you got all this is great, but I think you should take out chapter 19 entirely. It's like, wait a second. I mean, and so you've got to take that advice. And then we're like, well, never mind. I'm not going to use it. You don't know what I'm talking about. And you really go through that battle. It really is a process. And then when it's done and you have it, then you've got to, how do I get it out? How do I tell people about it? And I can't go on TV. I can't do podcasts. I can't, I'm not, and so that's a lot of work. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. But I will say this, it is incredibly rewarding. And having done it several times myself, I can tell you that when it's done, it's worth it. It's worth it. When you've done all of it, you can sit back and you can have something to be proud of. But there are definitely things that you need to learn along the way. And for me, it was, letting people critique your work is hard. Turning it over, trusting someone else is hard. Getting past that imposter syndrome of like, why do I even think I can do this? Is difficult. But that's why, again, surrounding yourself with good people is important.
I love that. I'm starting this new thing where I wrap up on a secret question for everybody.
Okay.
Um, but I want everybody, you told everybody the website. If you'll give everybody the website again, and just so that way they can check you out for your speaking, podcast appearances, books, wherever they, your intelligence assessment. Tell them again where they can get all this, so that way, we can start spreading the good word of changing this leadership culture in the world.
Yeah. So the website is just MatthewKutz.com. And again, Matthew is with 2 T's and Kutz is the last name, all one, MatthewKutz.com. I have a second website that's put up for prostate cancer awareness and education. That's battleforthebulge.com. And so that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing that we did to try to grab some attention. But I also wrote a book called Diagnosed, which is a book about overcoming healthcare adversity and things like that, which people have been telling me they've been really, really blessed by it and encouraged by it. And you can get that there. We do fundraising for prostate cancer awareness. And then also all my contact information and things like that are there as well. So 2 websites. The first one is MatthewKutz.com. The second one is battleforthebulge.com. All one word.
I love that. That's prostate cancer is such a silent killer,
It really
and
is.
I'm glad that you were able to beat that and move forward and share your message.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think that your mindset in life helped you with that, because you have to stay positive throughout that and check,
You do.
make sure you're still doing good to move forward. And so I'm glad that you're still here to share that message. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So I want to ask everybody, moving forward, if today was your last day, what is a positive thing, that message, phrase, something that you'd want to be remembered for, or you could share with the world that could
Wow.
help change the world?
If I had to leave a last message, the thing that I like to say, and one of the things that jumps to my mind, of course, if you asked me this on a different day, I'd have something else to say. But right now, what's resonating in my heart is this idea of, is the phrase is like this: chaos is the package that your potential arrives in. And the thing that I strive to do with even myself, anybody I mentor or coach, my own kids, for example, I always tell them, when you find yourself facing chaos and uncertainty, that is the time, that moment is itself the warning sign or the red flag that it's time to do something different than you've always done. And that's when we innovate. That's when we create. So the statement again is chaos is the package that your potential arrives in. We have to believe that.
Yep. I agree wholeheartedly. That's when the innovation starts, and that's when we start changing the world and stop doing what we've always done and start making this spinning world a better place.
That's right.
Dr. Coots, it's my pleasure to have you tonight, and I would love to have you on again.
Thanks,
Um,
Brent. I'd
and
love that.
I'm actually talking about getting some people that love talking about leadership and doing a roundtable podcast one night. So we will have to do this again, and you are definitely welcome back.
All right. That'd be fun.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Bye bye.